Welcome to another edition of the Good Eye Podcast. I'm Jay Smack, your host and producer, and today, doing something a little bit different. What you're going to hear is actually an old episode. It's not that old. I recorded it last year with the executive director of the then Chrysalis Institute. Now, Chrysalis underwent a rebranding, as you hear us talk about during the episode. They are now the Innerwork Center. And we talk about a lot of stuff that's relevant no matter when it is, but some of the references are dated, and of course the rebranding and some of the events that Rachel mentions have already happened. But I wanted to get it back out there because this podcast also underwent a rebranding, took it down and named it something else and brought it back up because apparently it shared a name was something else that already existed. So we rebranded it, brought it back up as the Good Eye Podcast. But Rachel's just a great person to talk to, and she has some great thoughts on mindfulness, and she is now the executive director at the Innerwork Center. So without dragging this out any longer, here is my conversation with Rachel Douglas from the Innerwork Center. At the time it was called Chrysalis Institute, on the Good Eye Podcast. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
This is really cool. My first exposure to Chrysalis Institute was through Synapse, the networking group that we're both associated with. Of course, you are the nonprofit host at Chrysalis, and one of the things that Synapse does is goes to nonprofits and kind of sets up shop at those locations and then has meetings there. And people kind of get to know each other, and it benefits the nonprofit, hopefully, and maybe benefits the members as they get to know each other. But wellness, as evidenced by this podcast, has always been something I'm interested in, just trying to, whether it's stave off father time and deterioration, or to better myself, whatever it is. Everybody has their own reasons, or to reduce stress through mindfulness practices. But it's always been something I've been interested in. When I came to Chrysalis, it just really made sense. And looking at all the programs and stuff that you guys have going on, why don't we start by just talking a little bit about what Chrysalis is, maybe some goals, how you got associated with them, and, not to put too much on your plate right off the bat, but if I have any questions, I'll kind of just jump in. But anyway, a little bit of background.
So I love the term wellness. And a term that I love even more is well-being. And I think that is squarely where Chrysalis fits. We are Richmond's home for inner work. And that is a new term for many. So I'll define kind of what we mean by inner work is that deep introspection that gives you clarity about what matters most in life. And we do that through programs. So we have, probably 60-some programs throughout the year. They're focused on mindfulness, on Jungian psychology, positive psychology, creativity, ecology, movement, all of those facets that we feel like contribute to living a meaningful life. And of course, what a meaningful life looks like is completely determined by you. And that's the great thing about inner work, is that you are the authority on what is a meaningful life. So it's that inner authority, that personal authority about what it looks like to you. So we won't spoon feed you. If you do this and you do that, then you'll live a meaningful life. Or if you do this and do that, then we promise you X, Y, Z. We can't do that, but you can do that for yourself.
And just pursuing what you described as a meaningful life has a level of intention that a lot of people aren't really in touch with, and not necessarily to their detriment or betterment, but just having that intention of desiring or working towards bettering yourself really is half the battle, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And so we can't tell you what your intentions should be, but we can teach you how to set an intention and what exactly is an intention. And these are things that I don't think we learned growing up. I know I didn't learn about what it meant to live intentionally or live with intention or even set intentions for myself. And so it's having that for myself as a personal tool has been wildly freeing, because if I set my intention for this, then I don't have to do that. I'm very clear about what is my work to do, what is mine to do in the world. And so the things that get a yes, get a hell yes. That's kind of a Brene Brown thing. But and that means that I can say no to some things. And when I'm saying no to something, I'm saying yes to something else, and vice versa. When I say yes to something.
Another interesting perspective, because it's a little bit further down my list, but just to jump ahead a little bit, the practice of meditation is not necessarily to, fly away in your brain to a land with unicorns and butterflies, but just the practice can help relieve stress. And you're not saying, oh, I don't want to be stressed. Everything is, I don't have time for this and that. I won't ever hit this deadline. But just the practice of focusing on your own mind helps it become clearer to you that your mind is always with you, and it's something that you can embrace and sort of, cultivate and make healthier.
Oh my gosh, there's so much in there that I want to talk about. So I used to think that meditation was something that helps you in the moment. And what I realized is that meditation helps you prepare for the moments that you don't yet know are coming, because you don't know what's going to happen to you in life. There could be certain things that you're dealing with at the moment, and meditation can be helpful there too. But the reason that you have a practice is so that your brain is practiced when you encounter some of those things that are hard, or you encounter moments of suffering or challenges, and then your practice shows up for you. So this is a wonderful thing. So you don't really want to wait until you're in crisis to start, if you're interested in mindfulness or meditation, you don't want to wait till you're in crisis to start practicing, although, the best time to start is yesterday and the next best time is today. But it's great if you already have a practice and you've built up this resiliency to deal with what life throws at you. And there was one other thing in there that you said that I wanted to address that I felt like was so rich.
Well, I'll let you chew on that a second. But,
okay.
Analogous to what you're talking about, I heard a great example, and it was we were talking before we started recording about various mindfulness practitioners and teachers, et cetera, et cetera. One of them is Sam Harris. He's pretty popular these days, almost trendy, but he's also a neurologist, so he comes at it from a point of science. But he sort of described mindfulness practices and meditation as, imagine if you're walking around with a clenched fist and you don't know and you don't think about it, but every now and then you're like, why is my hand so tired? And you look down and your fist is clenched, so you unclench it and you kind of go about your day. And you notice later, again, my hand is tired again, and you look down and your fist is clenched. So the practice would be to realize that your hand is open while you can, because the more you notice it's open, the less it will be clenched, which is kind of simplistic, but it really kind of works.
It really does. It actually describes a personal experience I have where in my role before I was at Chrysalis, I would throw my back out every September, and it was like, I couldn't figure out why every September here I was going around with this hurt back and having to see a chiropractor for months then to get it straightened out. And then when I learned the practice of awareness and paying attention to my body without judgment, I realized that, it was because I had a huge event in September and I was so tense.
Every September?
Every September. Yeah. So every September this event would start. It was like a program that would launch in September. And I was so, I really wanted to get it right. And I was so passionate about it that I would walk around literally like a clenched up fist all over my body. And it's, I'm starting now at 4 years later, having a practice 4 years, to be less clenched, but only through continuous awareness throughout the day. I have to say to myself, check between my eyes, check my jaw, check my shoulders, check my glutes. What am I doing with my hands?
Right.
Multiple times because I just
And speaking of jaw, that's exactly what I was thinking. You were talking about your hurt back. A lot of people grind their teeth and don't even realize it.
Yeah. So awareness really helps with that. Oh, I remember what you said that I wanted to talk about, which was the stress. So actually, it's all related. So we were talking about meditation and how that helps you with stress or to be less stressed. And what I have found and what I've learned is that that's kind of a misnomer. And it's crazy because we actually offer a class called mindfulness-based stress reduction. So it sounds like you're reducing your stress. But what I have learned is that you're actually just shifting your relationship to your stress. Mm-hmm. So like sometimes you can't remove your stressors. If you're sick or there's something to do with your finances or your relation, there are many things that can be fixed and many things that can't. And so what mindfulness helps you do is shift your relationship to that stress. So it's not impacting you the way that it would if you weren't able to say, oh, hey, stress, I see you. I see you showing up in my life. This is what it looks like.
The tiger as representing your anger. Mm-hmm. If you see the tiger and you put a face on it and you embrace it, it sort of robs it of some of its power because it's not sneaking up on you.
Yes.
Hey,
tiger.
Yeah,
I see you.
Exactly. Now, I don't think we touched on this. What exactly is your role at Chrysalis? And everybody can check out Chrysalis at chrysalisinstitute.org. Mm-hmm. And you're going to be undergoing a rebranding soon?
We are.
Okay.
So May 2nd, we're going to launch our new brand. I can't tell you what it is, but if you are interested in coming to our launch, and everyone's invited, it's May 2nd at VCU during our keynote presentation. It's a keynote mosaic on the topic of evolving. And so we're going to look at how Richmond is evolving in certain ways. What is the future of spirituality look like? And how are we evolving culturally? And how are we evolving through our community work? And, how's the climate evolving? And so we're going to be touching on those subjects. And it's 7 to 9.
7 to 9.
Yeah,
pretty apropos name to Chrysalis. Maybe you'll be called Moth next or something.
We're actually going with something a little bit more concrete.
Okay.
So our goal was clarity. Chrysalis is a beautiful, poetic word, and it is so appropriate to the work that we do. People who remember their third grade science know that a chrysalis is when a caterpillar turns into a butterfly. And so it's this period of great transformation. I mean, it's grotesque. They liquefy, and then they recreate themselves into something beautiful with wings. And it is a very poetic way. And our programs do provide transformation. So it's apropos. But if you don't know what a chrysalis is, then you don't really know. You can't really translate that to, they do they do transformational programs. And sometimes you can't pronounce it and you can't spell it. And no
Chrysalis,
judgment.
You mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No judgment on that, but we run into it a lot. So our new brand our intention is clarity.
Okay, cool.
With our new brand, and then we're aiming for visual poetry. So we're hoping it will be very pretty is another way of saying that.
Nice.
So my role at Chrysalis is the executive director, and I'm the first executive director this organization has ever had, which is such an honor. We're in our 25th year, so this is our 25th birthday year of 2019.
That's crazy. Congratulations.
Thanks. So we are old, but we're new. And so you've heard me talk about this before, but it was started by this woman, Nancy Milner, and she was a seeker, and she was traveling all over the world to see these people that were very inspirational to her. And at some point, her partner said to her, it'd be a lot more cost effective if you were to bring these people to Richmond instead of traveling all over the world. I love it. It's like very pragmatic. And also, Nancy's community, her friends were also very interested in finding new ways to answer these age-old questions. Who am I? What's my purpose? Why am I here? What happens when I die? So that's how it was called the Chrysalis Group, and that's how it was born. Nancy started it, and it was Nancy and her friends, and then they told their friends, and they told their friends, and so it grew like very organically. But it amazes me that a nonprofit like that was able to sustain itself for 21 years
pretty
in Richmond.
remarkable.
It really is, and so it's a testament to Nancy and all of those people who were part of Chrysalis in the early days, and I feel like in the it's a 21-year span. So I came from VCU, and I was working in the Division of Community Engagement doing outreach to the nonprofit sector. So I ran a program called Nonprofit Learning Point, and it was professional and leadership development, all classes in all aspects of running a nonprofit. And so I actually had no spiritual development experience whatsoever. I even wrote, or maybe when I called to talk to them, I said, I have no experience in this at all. But I had a ton of nonprofit management and leadership know-how that I was like raring to apply to a nonprofit. So it's really, I feel like the perfect match. And so I've applied all, my experience and expertise to Chrysalis, and I have learned so much personally. I've grown so much. In fact, I always say, I went to school for, 28 years, but I haven't learned that. But I learned the most in all of those years. I've learned the most at Chrysalis. It's been the most impactful education I could have ever gotten. It's really connected me to me.
Now, what sort of education? I mean, applying your know-how from your formal education as well as, say, your spiritual or emotional journey, all of that?
Oh, no. I mean, so what I mean is what I learned through all of those classes at Nonprofit Learning Point and all those aspects of nonprofit management and leadership. So I put that to work for Chrysalis. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. And like you say, you learned so much after your education, after your formal education. I was just curious as what form of learning do you think you've taken on most in your time with Chrysalis?
Oh, yes. So I actually, every single class I take, and even actually oftentimes informally through my mentors and the people that I'm surrounded with, we joke at Chrysalis, we work for wisdom. We have, faculty that drop in all the time, and they sort of drop these wisdom bombs. They don't mean to. It's just who they are in the world.
Yeah.
And we're rocked afterwards. It's like, oh, it changes my whole perspective on life. And so it's really an honor to be in that, atmosphere and to do my job. But I can give an example from the last class I took at Chrysalis, which was mindful self-compassion. And there was an exercise that we did called Soften, Soothe, Allow. And it was thinking of a event that was very stressful in your life, and where you feel it, when you think about it, where you can feel it in your body, and then try to soothe that place in your body. And it's not, I'll share my experience with you, but it's so personal and so experiential that what you get out of it is going to be so different from what I get out of it. But what I got out of it was a sense of healing that I have never experienced before. I know what it means to protect myself. I know what it means to say, well, this happened to me because of capitalist patriarchy, and this happened to me because of all of these systems at work. But I didn't know what it meant to actually feel healing in myself. And it's very, very different.
Did it some sort of release or just recognition or a little bit of both? Yeah,
a little bit of both. It's like it really was a softening.
Now, you talked about some of the programs and how much you've learned. What are some of the other types of programs that Chrysalis offers? That in and of itself was as much of a revelation to me. All these great resources are just there for me to go check out. Now, as a musician, I was really interested in the drum circle, but of course you've got guided meditations and retreats and things like that, and just speakers. Maybe talk about some of those that have come through.
Yeah, we have two keynote speakers every year. And now we offer, 40, 50 classes, and those are, led by local professionals that are fantastic and some of the best that I've seen around the world now. But our keynotes are this opportunity for us to bring people from, national and internationally, thought leaders that are here to inspire us and maybe shift our perspective on life. And so we brought Dr. Catherine Sanderson, who was she's a professor of happiness. She talked about the science of happiness. And we brought this guy, Dev Dutt, who talks about your story and how your truth is probably very different from my truth. And actually, how do we look at truth across time and perspective? And we brought Ruth King, who gave us another lens for seeing how we can go through how we can relate to really difficult topics such as racism in America. The hardest topic there is right now to deal with.
Yeah, and just converse about. It's hard to have that conversation.
It is,
it's very emotional and raw.
Yeah, so she talks about all these different tools that we can use to address, to have this conversation. And one of the things I found that was really cool about what she said is this idea of hosting racial affinity groups. So essentially white people can get together with white people and talk about our whiteness, because it's not a nothing, it is a something. And so how can we talk about our experience as it relates to race, and that we have a lot of this intra work to do so that we can stand up for folks of color who are experiencing racism every day.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Speaking of each individual's truth, we all bring something different to the conversation, but they need to intermingle in order to really make it a conversation and not, just one-sided. Now, how about we'll get into the guts a little bit, some membership opportunities and volunteer opportunities at Chrysalis?
Yes, we are a membership organization, so it is. So we're a nonprofit. I should start with we are a nonprofit, and half of our revenue comes from our programs, but the other half comes from individual donations and memberships. So we would love to have you join as a member. We feel that what mostly membership represents is that you believe that Chrysalis is a really important part of a thriving community. And it also gets you half off on classes. So that's not nothing.
No. Decidedly something.
Yes. Membership is $50 for the whole year. We also have student memberships and senior memberships.
A couple of programs pays for itself.
It really, sometimes just one. Yeah.
And corporate partnership. It's cool to see some of the, and when I say corporate, it's organizations like Elwood Thompson's. That makes perfect sense. Natural Awakenings, Needs Nursery are just a few. Are you always looking for corporate partnerships?
We are, yeah. So some of our best, relationships are with these businesses because they help us achieve our mission. And those are some great examples. We've also just recently developed the capacity to take our programs into businesses. So we love, creative brainstorming. And so there's so many multiple ways that we work with businesses. But one is that, we deliver. So, you might be sitting there thinking like, well, I don't need to be more mindful, but, my boss, it's another story, or my colleagues, or et cetera, et cetera. So we hear you. So we, and we've had so many requests to bring our classes into not just like a corporate business, but like a yoga studio or a doctor's office or just multiple opportunities. And the really cool thing about it is that it gives people a common language. So when you take it all together, it's really cool because then you can talk about your experience in a common language that you might not necessarily have with other people.
Sort of a team building exercise as well.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to hit on mindfulness in the workplace, which is this whole conversation of mindfulness and getting in touch with the self. It used to be something that people sort of looked down their noses at or didn't think that was terribly important. But I think they're starting to see the benefits of mindfulness and mindfulness practices, especially in the workplace. And certain studies have shown that due to the bombardment of texts and emails and chats and social media and deadlines, it really influences productivity, that they're figuring out, you could say from a clinical standpoint, based on the studies they've done, that it's difficult to stay focused. Mindfulness practices in the workplace decrease stress, increase efficiency, and it's all that push and pull, Energy is not manufactured or destroyed. It just changes from one form to the other, whether that's positive energy or negative energy. How's the response been to you guys coming into a workplace and working with people? Again, if nothing else, just for a team building exercise, but how's that been in your experience?
Yeah, I think it's sort of like a flywheel, right? It's starting to gain momentum. And a lot of it is because exactly what you said. And, businesses exist for a return on investment. That's, I think, why they exist. And so when they see that mindfulness, this is a performance enhancer. I can actually measure this to the bottom line, which some of the big companies are doing, Google and Aetna, and I think Cigna, a few others are actually putting out the research that's showing the return on investment. I think it's also gained in popularity, even though we know this is an age-old practice. We now have all this neuroscience that can say,
right,
look, your brain is actually changing as a result of you practicing, just like your biceps change as a result of you lifting weights. That's essentially, mindfulness is like, bicep curls for your brain. And so now that we can, I'm using air quotes here, prove this, it's people feel more comfortable bringing it into the workplace, and some are even bragging about it.
I'm glad you brought that up as well, about the physical changes in the brain. And if you do a regular practice, it takes a while. You don't feel like you're really doing anything, but after a few days or even weeks, you really do start to feel a difference, even if it's hard to describe. But some of the studies that have been done that have shown positive effects on the brain include effects on the aging process of the brain itself. Something you touched on, increased cortical thickness in the part of the brain which governs learning and memory. No wonder businesses are getting all of it. And I'm kind of trying to tie it into the practical side, because some people are in touch with it, some people aren't. But when businesses starting adopting it to, like you said, address their bottom line, there's definitely something there. And it's not just, new age weird science, the way they used to look at it. It's pretty encouraging, and more research being done all the time.
Yeah, Sam Harris is one of them that you mentioned, and then Dr. James Doty is another one, and we're bringing him here next. We're bringing him here in the fall.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, back to some of the practices. How much, if at all, naturally it's going to lean this way a little bit, does Chrysalis's approach to mindfulness and wellness lean on the classic conception of, say, Eastern philosophies? You mentioned Jungian philosophy, which is, it borrows from Eastern but leans Western, and Buddhism. How much of the approach do you think is rooted in the popular notion of Zen Buddhism and Eastern philosophies?
Yeah, so what I would say is that Chrysalis classes pull from multiple wisdom traditions and are also grounded in evidence-based practices. So while you can make the connection to multiple Eastern principles, that is not the root for Chrysalis.
As opposed to, the sound of one hand clapping, or visualize the seer. Okay, how about some of your favorite mindfulness practices? Are there things you do every day aside from just sitting? You mentioned remembering to be mindful things of that nature, other mindfulness practices. And in our meeting the other day, you were talking about some of the stuff you're doing with diet, et cetera, et cetera. What are some of your favorite practices?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, my absolute favorite practices are the ones I do with my kids before bed. So I have a almost 6-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. And so with my almost 6-year-old, we use an app called Mindful Powers. Essentially, frames mindfulness as a superpower, but it has all kinds of guided meditations that we can do, to like body scans or watching our emotions or, non-judgment. And so I absolutely love seeing the way that mindfulness, the way that she has incorporated mindfulness into her own life is beautiful to me. And it doesn't happen in the moment either. But it happens in little things that she does throughout the day that are subtle that I notice. And so that's one of my favorite practices. And we switch back and forth who puts who to sleep. So my wife and I. And so then other nights I have my son who's 1.5. And he had a adventurous entrance into this world. And so we spent a lot of time in the NICU. And as soon as I could see him, we started singing a loving kindness meditation. And so
when he was born?
When he was born, yeah. And so one of my mentors had suggested it to me, it was kind of in passing. And it was a year, maybe 2 years before I even needed it. But when I needed it, I remembered her saying, oh, yeah, you can sing a loving kindness meditation. And we just started singing. And so, that's his lullabies. We sing loving kindness together. And we give loving kindness to ourselves and then, to my wife and to my daughter and then to the people we love and the people who we just experience throughout the day and then the people that stress us out a little bit. And to the whole world. And he doesn't talk yet, but he kind of, he kind of sings with me. And it's very, very sweet. So I look forward to those practices the most. But and then awareness just throughout the day, checking in with my body. It is, what I found about mindfulness is it's not necessarily about when you sit on the cushion. Mm-hmm. It's one of my favorite mindfulness teachers, Sherry Clower, says it's about like every second of every minute of every day. And I love that. It's continuous. And she also says it's dose dependent. So the more you give to it, the more it will give to you, which I also love. But other practices I have just are walking, being in nature, massage. I get a massage once a month from Camille at Sacred Waters. I love her. She's amazing.
Have you tried flotation therapy?
I have.
That's really cool.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And what I found was that it was a beautiful accompaniment to my mindfulness practice. It gave me a good solid hour and in silence.
Shout out to David Burr of the Float Zone.
He's amazing.
He's been on this show.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. And then Ashley Manel. So you were talking about sort of changes that I've been making to my diet. I'm participating in an elimination program right now, which has you eliminate 14 of your most commonly eating
shout out
foods.
To Ashley, richmondfoodandmood.com.
Yeah, and so I'm on like my 10th day, and after day 5, I felt a huge difference in brain fog, and I started it because of my inflammation and chronic pain that I've had since I was 9 years old, and so all my inflammation has been reduced considerably. I still have pain, but it's been reduced considerably, and I feel like I'm thinking more clearly, and it's been great. It's a really interesting process, and I've only just begun. So,
you mentioned an app. Do you have any other favorite apps that you like? We were talking earlier. I like the Sam Harris app. Calm is a good one. Those are all really popular. But are there any others you mess around with?
I try to try them all.
Yeah.
There's some that there's some that are more that I trust more than others, but they're kind of expensive. And I have this, I happen to be really privileged in that I have this amazing resource at my fingertips, which is Chrysalis.
Yeah.
And so actually we have these meditations that we recorded when we were doing a crowdfunding campaign to renovate our new space. And I keep those actually really close by, and I listen to them a lot, and I'm happy to send them to you so you can put them in the notes for the podcast if you want to share
sure.
them with your listeners. There's about 5, and they're all different types of meditations, like gratitude and awareness and concentration. And I think there's loving kindness in there. And
that's something I wanted to touch on. You've mentioned loving kindness a couple times, and for people who may not be familiar, that's a practice in meditation when you envision someone you love or someone you're close to or care about. I guess it doesn't even have to be. Maybe someone that you just wish well, and seeing them be happy and seeing them get everything they want in life. That doesn't necessarily mean physical things, but it's amazing what that can do. And to me, that speaks to our connection to each other and how much of a community minded and how much the existence in community is so important for us. When you picture someone you love being happy, especially maybe during a time that they're going through a tough time, you can feel a physical presence I feel it in my chest and my shoulders lift. And that is beneficial for you. And you've mentioned that a number of times. Is that one of your favorites?
that is one of my favorites. And so, I can share mine with you.
Sure, if you want. Yeah.
So the one that I do with Shia, my son, is, you always start with yourself. So may I be happy, may I be well, may I feel loved, and may I live from the ground of love and kindness. And when we do it for him, we say, may I grow from the ground of love and kindness. I just speak for him because he doesn't speak yet. But, and then we move on, may mama be happy, may she be well, may she feel loved, and may she live from the ground of love and kindness. And then we would say, may Jay be happy, may he be well, may he feel loved, and may he grow from the ground of love and kindness. And it does remind us of that interconnectedness of all of life, without exclusion. And one of the biggest impacts it's had for me is with forgiveness. And so forgiveness is something that I struggle with a lot. I was thinking, should I use past tense or present tense? Mm-hmm. I will say present tense, but I've gotten a lot better about it. And so I used to really hold on to things and had a very hard time letting things go that I took personally. And what loving kindness has done is it's allowed me to place those people that have hurt me beside me instead of opposite me. And when they're beside me, it's really hard to not think about the fact that they want all of those things too.
In this together. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. Sarah Daves, who is also a member at the group that we attend together for Synapse at Chrysalis, was talking about that and the interconnectivity and the connection between people and how love and suffering need each other. Not because they justify each other, but as we touched on earlier, energy is not created or destroyed. It's just transferred from one form to another. And you've got to be in touch with and almost embrace the suffering and know that it's going to happen. It does, mindfulness and meditation and practices like these does not eliminate suffering. It just kind of makes you at least a little bit okay with the fact that it's going to happen. And you're going to have a clenched fist once in a while. So anyway, do you have some favorite mindfulness books or speakers or philosophers?
Yes, I would say Ruth King is one of my just top absolute favorites. She's incredible. She was here for our keynote. She's going to be in Charlottesville in March for about a week doing multiple events. So I don't know when this is going to air, but
soon, within the next couple of weeks.
Okay,
we're
so
recording on Valentine's.
You might be able to catch Ruth King.
I'll try to get it on in time.
I love Tara Brach. She's up in D.C. I love Sharon Salzberg. She's in Boston or somewhere in Massachusetts.
Have you met these people?
I have, actually.
Yeah, that's cool.
Wait, no. I've interacted with Tara Brach over, it was a live webinar, but it wasn't in person. But I did go to retreat with Sharon Salzberg and Sylvia Borstein, so she was another person I was going to recommend. And then Ruth, when she came here to Richmond. But
nice.
I also just want to give a shout out to my local mentors and the mindfulness faculty at Chrysalis, who are incredible. And at one point in my journey through Chrysalis, I was given a grant to go do some of my own spiritual development work. And I thought, oh, this is great. I'm going to go, outside. And I went to some of these big retreat centers and saw these really big famous names. And they were great. And I always came back to Richmond saying, they're not any better than what we have right here. So like Philip and Kay Davidson and Susan Wilkes and Sherry Clower, like I mentioned, and are just Alex Peavy and Chris Reyna. They're just incredible resources that we have right here in Richmond. John Taylor, Shanza Isom.
That's really cool. And that seems to happen to Richmond a lot. I mean, people go out and they maybe see music or food or educational opportunities, and they come back and say, yeah, it was great, but we got some good ones here too.
Richmond's got that, yeah. And I think the mindfulness faculty here could be famous. I mean, they have all of the charisma and the content expertise and the experience and the practice, most importantly. But they don't put themselves up on the pedestal and the showcase and all of that.
Rachel, I appreciate you coming. Is there anything we didn't hit on maybe that you'd like to mention?
Nothing that I can
Good.
think of right this second.
Good.
Yeah, but thank you so much. This has been really fun.
Will you come back?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, absolutely.
I want to do a roundtable too as the guest list grows, and maybe have people like David Burr, have you in, have Ashley in. We're trying to build a community here, just like Chrysalis. So I appreciate you coming by, and I hope you'll come back and be a friend of the show.
I'll sit at the table with you any day.
Awesome. Rachel Douglas, thank you so much. And Chrysalis online at chrysalisinstitute.org. This has been the Well and Good Podcast. Thanks again to Rachel for coming by. That conversation recorded last year. It is now mid-2020. Don't we know it? And that was recorded closer to early 2019. But like I said, the conversation is still relevant. Just some of the references and events have already passed. But I do appreciate Rachel and everyone at the Innerwork Center. I mentioned the Chrysalis Institute online presence, but the Innerwork Center is located at innerworkcenter.org. So go there to find out any information that they have available, which is a lot. I'm looking at the website now, and they still got a bunch of really cool programs and speakers and drop-in groups and retreats and stuff like that. So innerworkcenter.org. Thanks very much for listening. If you have any feedback or questions, hit me up directly at smackj@gmail.com, or the address for the podcast is goodeyepodcast@gmail.com, online at goodeyepodcast.com. Thanks very much for listening. Till next time, try to look at life with your good eye.